starting from last time. So I'll just get into the presentation and then we'll be able to give our feedback. So a bit of a recap from last time. A BHAG is a big, hairy, audacious goal. It is a clear, compelling, and ambitious goal that serves as a unifying focal point of effort for an organization. And one of the things that Jim and Jerry, they call it the Yin-Yang. It is the interplay between the core and that is the preserving the core and stimulating progress. And we see that coming out, especially in this chapter. So a few quotations from various leaders on audacious goals. Theodore Roosevelt, for better to dare mighty things, to win glorious triumphs, even though checkered by failure, than to take rank with those poor spirits who neither enjoy much nor suffer much, because they live in the great twilight that knows not victory nor defeat. And the exhortation is that instead of living in what is calling the great twilight, then it's better to experience a glorious triumph, even though it may be checkered once in a while by failure. And so on. I think I may not need to read the others since this is a recap. And this is President Kennedy's big, hairy, audacious goal that this nation should commit itself to achieving the goal before this decade is out of landing a man on the moon and returning him safely on Earth. And the context was that it was not the most favorable. Like it is not because conditions were absolutely favorable that he had that goal. But as we see later on, is that this goal was clear and compelling. It engaged the people, and it outlived him. I think that's the other thing that we are seeing about these goals, that they are not leader-centric, so to speak. In fact, when we look now at the example of Citibank, which I think has since rebranded to Citicorp. Anyway, they say that it's like every leader was able to have, or you could be able to see, because the other thing we're saying about these audacious goals is that they are only important as long as they've not been achieved. They are only useful. Then, like in the case of Citibank, what we see is the ability to, upon achieving one audacious goal, be able to set another one and pursue it relentlessly. So we had the case of President Kennedy. We had Boeing 747 and Henry Ford, and all of this is that they set goals. They were not necessarily the most favorable of times. And also we had Sam Walton. I mentioned last time that this one really resonated with me. Really did resonate with me because he's saying, make my little Newport store the best, most profitable variety store in Arkansas within 5 years. So you can see he's acknowledging that it's not the biggest store there is, but it can be the best, it can be the most profitable. The word I use for it is it can be truly prolific. And then it required tripling sales. In fact, well, this says per year, from 72 to 250, but then it was going to be consistent tripling of sales. I mean, that was quite audacious. And well, just to mention that, of course, they have become the biggest, most profitable store in Arkansas and the surrounding 5 states. Yeah, so I don't know, maybe this resonated with me because, I don't know, I was going to say because it's business, but I'm realizing it's business as opposed to John Kennedy, the moon mission, but I'm realizing even Boeing 747 and Henry Ford were still businesses. So maybe it's just resonance. So the BHAGs, we said, need to be clear and compelling to engage people. Then they require commitment and risk. And what we said is that to the outsider, it looks audacious, but to those that are inside, they don't see it. They don't see it as audacity, really. They look at it and say, it doesn't occur to us that we cannot achieve this goal that we have set. Well, here it's just a warning not to arrive. We had the case of Ford that arrived and was overtaken by GM. And a summary of key principles from that was that the audacious goals stimulate progress. Commitment is essential. They are clear, not complex. I think we had a case of one that was, I don't remember which one it was, but it was mouthful. And then risk is inherent. So let's look at part 2. It's just part 2. I mean, we are just the ones that said that the chapter is not necessarily divided into 2 parts. And but then by virtue of its size, we thought we could cover it in 2 sessions. So one of the things that we see is what is called the post-heroic leader stall. So in what Jim and Jerry call, they're like the control companies. So you have the visionary companies, and then you have the great companies, which still do very well, they would say, but then they are exceeded by, we saw it's by a factor of, on average, a factor of 7, which is huge. You know, a factor of 7 means that if one is doing 1,000, then that's a great company is doing 1,000, then the visionary company will be doing 7,000. So the comparison companies, all of them had what you would call heroic leaders. But then what you notice is that with the departure or demise of the heroic leader, they would stall. And so the common challenge that is identified is that they lose momentum after the energetic founders leave. And that's why the thing that is the thing that makes or differentiates a visionary company from the comparison company is that the visionary companies have audacious goals that transcend the leaders, okay? So the bugs in and of themselves take a life of their own. So of course they stimulate progress through multiple generations because they have become bigger than any individual leader. So that's what we see, that the comparison companies, they had post-heroic leaders whose departure led the companies to stall. But for the visionary companies, they were able to establish audacious goals that transcend the visionary leader. Then one of the things that is mentioned is that in as much as you set these goals, the audacious goals at the company level, you can actually set them at every organizational level. You know, like as a department, you can have your own audacious goal, which then would be able to stimulate progress at that level. And the other point they note is that you can pursue multiple BHAGs. It doesn't mean that it has to be one particular audacious goal that you are pursuing at any point in time. In terms of what they were calling clock builders, if you remember the analogy of clock builders, what they say is that, well, you could have someone who can tell time and they know what time it is at any time of the day. You know, like they don't even need to refer anywhere. If you wake them up at night from sleep, they'll be able to know what. Sorry, but the thing is that if that is what you are, if you are a time teller or a time traveler, a time teller, and you don't build a clock, then what happens when you're no longer there to tell the time? Then the thing is that the people who relied on you to know what time, they will no longer have, or they will no longer know what time it is. And by the way, that analogy of time is really powerful. And even the analogy of the clock is really powerful. I think I'll share on our WhatsApp group a poem written by a friend of mine called My Friend the City Clock. And just the way that there is quite a lot that you can learn from the city clock. I'll share that on the WhatsApp group. But if you think about telling time as being able to know what is relevant for our day, okay? Yeah, that's what is it that is relevant, for example, as a business for the day in which we live in. Which way is the wind blowing, so to speak? If you think of time telling as the ability to know what is relevant and to cash in on that, literally, then what we're saying is that the time teller can tell what time it is and they're productive in their day. They build successful companies in their day, but beyond them, the company does not exist in greatness as it did in their day. But then those who build a clock, and it's an analogy that is used a lot in the book, those who build a clock, then they see success that outlives their time telling. And here they contrast two companies, Zenith, which had a great leader, but didn't have the ability to continually reinvent with audacious goals, vis-a-vis Motorola, which has been able to continue to set, to achieve and set new audacious goals. And he said that the difference is that McDonald was a great time teller. I think that should be time teller, but Galvin built a clock. So an important thing is that the audacious goals, remember, should be aligned to the core. Okay? Yeah, because that is the center around which everything revolves. And we are given the example of GE, that's General Electric, that their audacious goal was to become number 1 or 2 in every market. Okay, and this quotation is by one of the employees. She says that we bring good things to life. Most wouldn't admit it, but everyone at GE gets chills when they hear that jingle. The simple corny phrase captures how we feel about the company. It means jobs and growth for the economy, quality and service for the customer, and benefits and training for the employee. And without this reservoir of values and commitment, Jack Welch could not have pulled off his revolution. So one of the things that they mention about GE is that Jack Welch was of the opinion that if they rise to become number 1 and 2 in every market, but they cut corners to do it, like they didn't do it ethically, then they still have not achieved. They have not succeeded. And you can see that commitment to not just an audacious goal, but to a core ideology, or to preserving the core. While stimulating progress, you're still preserving the core. So to conclude, the key takeaways are BHAGs transcend individual leaders and they drive multi-generational progress. They must be clear, compelling, outside comfort zone, and they get people excited. So clear and compelling, you don't want them to be mouthful. That's what we said. You want them to be that they're not achieved inside comfort zones, but then people are excited to achieve them. And the analogy that was used was that of climbing a mountain. Then they can and should exist at multiple levels of organization. They always align BHAGs with core ideology, that is critical. So preserve core values while pursuing bold goals. And then once you have achieved, another way of putting that is that they are only relevant as long as you've not achieved them. But the moment you achieve them, then it's time to move on to new ones.